American working class is shriveling up and dying right before our eyes. Without an abundance of good jobs, more and more people are simply exiting the labor force and living off federal assistance programs, a phenomenon that experts say is likely to cause a long-term structural problem in the U.S. economy. Millions of Americans are out of work, but official unemployment numbers only show a fraction of what is really going on. The way unemployment data was calculated has changed several times over the past few years, and the figures released by government agencies tend to sugarcoat the reality for entirely political reasons. Last month, hundreds of thousands of people have dropped out of the labor force, but labor statistics from January actually suggest that the shortage of workers is actually easing. Needless to say, that's far from the truth. In fact, recent surveys have exposed that a staggering number of workers are planning to leave the United States workforce in 2022. Recent stats also show that there are simply not enough good jobs to go around anymore, and the vast majority of the population is working in low-wage positions. However, working-class Americans seem to be waking up to the fact that the main asset they have to offer in the marketplace is their labor, and their decision to quit their posts to seek better compensation is forcing companies to raise wages. Over the past few decades, U.S. companies have largely outsourced their production to Asian countries so that they could profit from cheaper labor costs. Millions of factory jobs have been lost in that process as domestic production declined, and these positions are not coming back. But recent events have exposed just how vulnerable supply chains are, and with problems compounding by the day, businesses are having to come up with new strategies to attract American workers back to the labor force. Unfortunately, up until this point, wage gains have not been very impressive, and with inflation running at the hottest rate in 40 years, workers are actually losing money as their buying power falls to the lowest level recorded since the 1980s. At the same time, homelessness and poverty are exploding in every corner of the country, as many families that used to have stable lives continue to struggle to make ends meet and are losing their homes due to soaring housing and rental prices. It's safe to say that the disruptions the industry has faced so far are just beginning. Things are about to get a whole lot worse, and with global tensions escalating and companies shutting down thousands of factories, the labor market is going to get tighter and tighter. For that reason, today we have gathered 35 facts that prove that the United States working class is being systematically wiped out. But before checking this list, please don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel to keep updated with future important videos. Number 1. Even though the official unemployment rate tells us that only 6.8 million Americans are currently unemployed, the number of Americans that are not in the labor force is at an all-time high. 2. According to an estimate released by the Ludwig Institute for Shared Economic Prosperity, if the rate of unemployment included those who have lost their jobs over the past 6 months, people who have been working in low-wage and low-hour jobs, and those that have been occasionally doing low-paid part-time jobs, the real number of out-of-work Americans would be approximately 22 million. 3. According to the latest available data, in September 2021, 8.5% of American workers were underemployed and making less than $20,000 a year. Number 4. Right now, there are 4.6 million more job openings than workers in the United States labor force, but there are still 5 million fewer jobs than before the health crisis. 5. In contrast, as many as 400,000 payroll jobs were lost last month alone. 6. In fact, since the year 2000, America has lost 30 million payroll jobs. 7. The United States has never experienced such an acute shortage of workers since the late 1940s. Number 8. A record 4.3 million people quit their jobs from August to December 2021, a phenomenon called the Great Resignation. 9. According to a survey conducted by the job site Glassdoor, more and more Americans are deciding not to come back to the workforce due to worsening work conditions. In January alone, 1.8 million people revealed to have plans to leave the labor force at some point in 2022. 10. Over the past 2 years, lower-income families are spending on average 70% more of their monthly budgets to cover daily expenses, while higher-income families are spending 35% more. 11. From 2002 to 2022, the number of Americans that have been unemployed for more than 6 months has soared from 8.6% to 25.1%. 12. Only 65.7% of American men had a job last year. That was the lowest level that has ever been recorded in all of U.S. history. 13. Inflation has taken away all the wage gains for U.S. workers and then some more. Although wages went up by 5% in February compared to a year ago when adjusted for inflation, wages have actually declined 2.6%. 14. Over half of all jobs in the United States are low-wage jobs. Currently, 53 million Americans are low-paid, accounting for nearly 2/3 of the entire labor force. 15. According to the Brookings Institution's Metropolitan Policy Program, the vast majority of Americans earn wages that are not enough on their own to promote economic security. 16. 12 million Americans are part of the group known as the working poor. 17. For most U.S. workers, real wages have barely budged in decades. Average hourly earnings currently stand at $22.65. However, in 1973, average hourly earnings were at $4.03, which would represent a purchasing power of $23.68 today. 18. Over the past 2 decades, 32% of all manufacturing jobs in the U.S. have disappeared. 19. Back in 1970, nearly 25% of all jobs in the United States were manufacturing jobs. Today, only 8.51% of the jobs in the country are in manufacturing. 20. Do you remember when the United States was the leading manufacturer of automobiles and trucks in the entire world? Well, in 2021, the U.S. ran a trade deficit in the auto industry of a staggering $68.9 billion. 21. In the early 1990s, the U.S. trade deficit with China was around $39 billion. In 2020, that figure jumped from $39 to $310.3 billion. 22. In the early part of the year 2000, the United States had a trade deficit of around $114 billion with the rest of the world. In 2021, that number has skyrocketed. The trade deficit now is a shocking $859.1 billion. 23. Since 2001, the U.S. labor market has lost an average of 50,000 manufacturing jobs per month. 24. Since the 1970s, U.S. manufacturing share of the gross domestic product has shrunk from 27% to 12%. 25. Over 50% of Americans don't earn enough to afford a one-bedroom rental unit. 26. Roughly 40 million Americans from ages 25 to 35 cannot afford to purchase a home. 27. 83% of workers who earn less than $20,000 a year face housing insecurity problems. 28. According to economic indicators at the Conference Board, 40% of Americans plan to cut back on spending over the next 6 months, a phenomenon known amongst economists as buyer's strike. 29. In February, consumer confidence fell for the 5th month in a row, dipping 111.1 points from a year ago, which represents a drop of 8.2%. 30. Nearly 13% of women, 10.6% of men, 9.7% of seniors, and 16.2% of children live below the poverty line in America. 31. Back in 1965, only 1 out of every 50 Americans needed federal assistance to get medical care. Today, 1 out of every 6 Americans needs federal assistance to receive health care. 32. 56% of all households in America now receive money from the federal government in one form or another. 33. Over the past 15 years, the number of U.S. households in need of food assistance increased by 22 million, currently standing at 46 million families. 34. From 1983 to 2021, the dollar's buying power has declined by 63%. And 35. According to Moody's Analytics, the wealthiest 1% of all households in the United States now account for around 40% of all consumer spending. Ladies and gentlemen, today wealth is more centralized than ever before. Most of the wealth being produced by our economy goes to a very small group of people at the very top of the food chain. And while all the rich get richer, the working class continues to suffer from debt, surging prices for food, surging prices for energy, gas, and housing, and low-paid jobs that do not allow them to keep up with the soaring cost of living. With both the middle and the working class shrinking at an alarming rate, the inequality gap is growing wider in the U.S., leaving most parts of the population at the brink of financial ruin. But for the first time in our modern era, companies that have been profiting from overseas labor over the past decades are now realizing that they've taken American workers for granted, and that worsening conditions in the labor market are leading to significantly lower profits as consumer spending slows down. America is seemingly headed towards a very dark future, and since the very foundation of our economy is cracking and crumbling, the collapse is going to be much more brutal than most people dare to imagine. Thank you for watching.